to Conversations for the Animals. I am Lisa Tynan with Houston Pet Set, and I am joined today by Miss Felicia, or Fee Kerney, as you go by. And I'm really excited to have you today because I think you are probably our first legal expert in the area of animal welfare, and people are going to have questions, and I'm going to have questions. And so I think we're going to be able to have a really, really fun and educational conversation about animal welfare from the legal perspective.
Okay.
So to start, obviously, we would like to know who you are, what you are doing here. I know currently you are with the Harris County Public Defender's Office. Is that correct?
Not anymore.
No, not anymore.
Yes,
this
I know.
Is new.
Things
okay.
change so quickly,
Things
Lisa.
change.
Yes.
Okay, yes. Enlighten us. What do you do?
So currently I am a criminal defense attorney.
Phenomenal.
How I became involved in animal welfare is I was a prosecutor in Dallas County,
Okay.
District Attorney's Office for 10 years, and then for the Animal Cruelty Unit, probably about 7 years.
Wow.
Yes, and so that's where I got involved with animal welfare.
Excellent.
And actually, I was a domestic violence prosecutor when I had my first introduction to animal cruelty.
Okay.
Which is so interesting. That's a whole nother story.
Yes.
But so that's what I'm doing currently. But of course,
Amazing.
I'm still always about animal welfare and doing whatever I can, whenever I can, to promote animal welfare and to discuss the importance of animal welfare.
Yes, and we have met through our wonderful partner Shelby Bobowski at Texas Humane Legislation Network, and I know that you have done a lot with her, with the organization. You do a lot of the law enforcement training, right? You'll go and speak to members of law enforcement, which is a huge thing, especially for some place like Houston where we have a million different law enforcement agencies. They all have different ways that they respond to animal cruelty calls or domestic violence calls. Fairly recent, was it last year when we had our link training here with the link between domestic violence and animal? I don't even remember when that was.
It seems like it was a while ago.
Yes, it feels forever ago. But the fact that you kind of came to animal welfare through domestic violence, from our perspective, makes sense because where people are being harmed, animals are being harmed.
Absolutely.
So we're so fortunate to have you as an advocate for the animals, first in Dallas and now here in Houston.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
So I think my very first question is, you said you were with the Animal Cruelty Division with the Assistant District, or with the District Attorney's Office. So, I am admittedly a Law & Order SVU fan. Who isn't?
Who isn't, right?
Who isn't? We all want to be Olivia Benson. But I think where especially from an animal welfare perspective, where people get confused is like, why aren't more people prosecuted for animal cruelty? And that first kind of stop once an animal is seized is a case has to get presented to the DA's office, right? So what does that process look like if, someone has called in an animal cruelty report and the agency has responded to it?
So I know in Dallas County, so if someone got a call for an animal cruelty case, then an investigator would go out there and they would, kind of see what was going on, and then they would seize the animal. But even prior to the filing of a criminal case, they would have a civil situation where we tried to have the dog or cat dispossessed from the owner.
Okay.
And so they have 10 days for us to have basically a hearing. And so at that time, the prosecutor would present evidence to show why the owner should not get their animal back.
Okay.
And then fast forward to the criminal part of the process. So once the case was investigated and it was presented to the District Attorney's Office, by that time, we would have all the information that we needed for the most part. Okay. And so a case would go to a defense attorney, or they would hire a defense attorney, and then we would have a conversation about what was the actual act that took place. Because sometimes you have situations where you have an owner who just doesn't know how to properly take care of their animal. They're not abusing the animal.
It's ignorance.
It's right.
Yeah.
And it's very unfortunate because the owner, they love their animal. They love their animal. But for whatever reason, they just don't know how to properly take care of that animal.
Sure.
Okay? And so in that situation, I feel like education is very important. But also you have to take in consideration that the animal is, it's harmed or it's hurt. You don't want to put an animal back in a situation where you know that they're going to be harmed.
Sure.
Okay. So, for example, in a case like, let's say we have a situation like that, then I would tell the defense attorney, okay, well, look, this is my issue. They don't know how to properly take care of the animal. I know that they love their animal. I've had situations where, I'm not kidding, like a person like broke down.
Yeah.
And it's so hurtful to see that. Mm-hmm. But unfortunately, you have an animal, you can't put an animal back in that type of situation.
Sure.
And so you want the owner to get, help and maybe take a class, but unfortunately they can't get their animal back.
Yeah.
But you want them to take a class too, so that if they do, hopefully in the future they won't until they're ready. But at least if they do, at least they're equipped to know and understand how to properly care for an animal.
Right.
Then you have those situations where there are people who are, I can't say what I want to say on air.
Yep. We know. We're reading what you're writing down there. Yep.
So then you have those people who you're like, you know what, this person is on his way to being a school shooter or on his way to doing something horrible to individuals. And I just want to say this, most of the school shooters have animal cruelty in their background.
Oh, yeah. It's almost like a 1-to-1 ratio that they have committed violence against animals.
And so that's why you have to take these cases seriously because, you could be preventing something else from taking place. So it's in those situations where, for me, if it was like a person who had no criminal history, for me, it was like, I'm sorry, the only thing I can offer you is jail time. Because I don't feel like probation's appropriate for you putting a dog on a stove and turn the stove on.
Right. There are levels, obviously, of offense
so
here.
To me, I just don't feel like that's appropriate. And so then that's the situation where we may end up going to trial.
Okay.
And then trial's a whole nother story because you have jurors who don't believe that this should even be a crime.
Right.
And so I'll put a pin there because you may want to talk about that
later.
Yes,
we're going to come back to that. Yeah.
But yes. So usually what happens is the case is filed. By the time the case is filed, we would have gotten photographs. We would have gotten, if the dog passed away, we would have gotten a necropsy. We would have known the cause of death for the animal. And we would have spoken to the veterinarian. So we would have had everything that we would needed to move forward in the prosecution of that case.
Right. So, you listed two incredibly extreme situations there, which is someone who, has a good heart but is ill-equipped, and then someone who has no heart and is, can't be amongst the public. But there are so many offenses that fall in between there. When the district attorney's office or whoever is making the decision to take a case past that first civil forfeiture, if you're deciding whether or not, yes, this rises to the level of criminality, what are some of the boxes that need to be checked that say, yes, this is definitely a criminal offense and we need to move forward?
So for me, I always look, when I'm evaluating a case, I always look forward as far as if I have to go to trial, what do I have to prove?
Okay.
So what elements will I need to have, or what information will I need to have in order to prove my case? And so for the prosecution of an animal cruelty case, I would want to have photographs. Okay. I want the investigator, officer to go out there. I would like to have seen photos, of what it looked like when they confiscated that animal.
Yeah.
Okay. Were they chained to a pole? Were they chained to a purple barrel? What did they look like when you found them? Could you see their ribs?
Right.
What was their body score count? Because it's different telling someone or telling a jury, hey, you can see their ribs, but it's different when you actually see that they're barely standing up, or you're able to see their rib cage because of the fact that they have not had anything to eat in God knows how long.
Right.
So for me, what would be important would be to see photographs of the scene, photographs of the animal when you remove the animal, photographs of the individual. I would like to get a statement from the individual because whatever they tell you at that time, let's say we have to go to trial. So then when we go to trial, if they don't tell you the same thing, then to me that goes towards their credibility.
Sure.
Because I've had situations where, thank goodness, Art Munoz, hi Art, he's now with the Garland Animal Control, I believe, and he's a director. But at the time, he was an animal control officer with SPCA in Dallas. And he would always, very thorough, he would always speak to them and ask them to give them a statement.
Okay.
And there was a situation where they gave him a statement, and then later on, what they said in the statement was completely different than what they said. And so I think that is very helpful because, oftentimes they change their story. So if possible, and I understand that they may not talk because, they have a right to have an attorney.
Sure.
So, but some people, they want to talk because they want to be able to get their side of the story out. So if an individual is willing to give a statement, I think that that's awesome and amazing.
Take it.
The neighbors, the neighbors might be like, well, I really didn't want to say anything, but now that you're here, now that you want to know, I don't know the last time I've seen that dog even being taken for a walk. I don't know the last time that I've even seen anyone even care or come out and to even check on the dog. You know what I mean? So I think that's helpful too because, you have, I don't know, I'm about to tell my age, but you have Mrs. Kravitz's out there.
Sure, yep.
Right?
Yep.
Who they can tell you what's going on next door and everything else. I think it's also important to speak with the neighbor. Even getting let's say the individual says, well, I took the dog to the vet. Okay, well, where are the veterinarian records?
Yes.
Show me where you've taken the dog to the vet. Show me where you have made an attempt to be a proper dog or cat or turtle owner.
Yeah.
Right? To show me where you have done what you need to do to make sure that your animal has been properly taken care of. So I want to see that information. I want to know the name of the veterinarian. If you're like, well, I don't have any, okay, well, give me the name. Mm-hmm. Let me go talk to them and see when was the last time that they brought their animal in to get their shots or to get their checkup or even to get their teeth brushed, anything. So I think that's important. But I think those are the main things. And again, if the animal has passed, then like a necropsy, because the necropsy is going to tell you exactly what's happened with the animal. And they're going to be able to tell you, was the death caused by blunt force trauma? And if that's the case, it would be consistent with maybe what we think it is.
Right. What the neighbor.
Right. What the neighbor is seeing. Right. So if you're telling me that the dog or cat fell off the sink, but the dog's or cat's head has been smashed in, then that's not consistent with the cat or a dog falling off the sink.
Right.
You know what I mean? So I think, that's also important as well.
So a lot of the responsibility falls on the agency, the first responding agency on the scene to make sure everything gets gathered right then and there, because if they don't have that, then you can't bring a case.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And I think it's so important because with my first case, which introduced me to my animal cruelty case, my domestic violence prosecutor, the individual has stomped the children's pet rabbit to death after he had assaulted the girlfriend. But so when law enforcement arrived, they threw the rabbit in the trash. And so, and my whole thing is, what I like to always say is, if you arrive on a murder scene, if you're like, oh, well, I know that this person was shot to death because they have a number of bullets in them, so we don't need to get a medical examiner to look at it. Let's just throw them. You're not going to throw a dead body in the trash. So the same way you would investigate a murder case, in my opinion, is the same way that you would investigate a situation where an animal has passed.
Right.
It's really not anything different. You're not going to throw the body away.
No.
You're going to have the body go to the medical examiner so the medical examiner can tell you what the cause of death is. And so It's the same thing with the animal. You're going to take the animal to a veterinarian and let them do a necropsy and tell you what the cause of death is. So it's really the same investigation that you would give on any other case, a murder case, whatever the case may be. That's the same thing that you're going to do. You're going to want to make sure that all your I's are dotted and that your T's are crossed.
Yes. So I briefly mentioned the law enforcement training, and I think some of this comes down to our law enforcement agencies taking animal cruelty seriously enough to be able to allow you to do your job or any prosecutor to do their job, because I know when we host these trainings or we fund these trainings through THLN, a lot of what we find is, number one, they're not being required in the academy to take animal cruelty courses. And number two, their agencies are not necessarily prioritizing it. So can you tell us a little bit about, because you've done a lot of these trainings and you're talking to frontline law enforcement, animal control people, what are some of the challenges that they are facing in order to be able to properly respond to animal cruelty cases? Is it just a matter of, their commanding officers don't prioritize it, so they don't?
I've heard situations where they're like, I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
Like, they're like, I don't know what to do when I get there. Like, I've never.
And that's just because the academy doesn't teach them that.
Because they don't know. I was fortunate enough when I was in Dallas County, we had a connection with a female who dealt with the training. So we weren't in the academy, but I was able to train like detectives, other officers. They kind of she kind of sneaked me into that training, but at least it allowed me to train the individuals who would be able to train or help the other officers.
Okay.
So I think because of the fact like that, there's not a lot of training. Like you said, there's not a training in the academy, to my knowledge. I could be wrong, but I'm not aware of any training where in the police academy where an individual gets, even if you just give them the basics,
right?
You know, the basic 101 of animal cruelty investigation, like on what to do. I think that would be helpful, but I think that oftentimes a lot of them may not know, okay, well, what do I need to do when I arrive at the scene? What do I do?
Right.
So I think I don't want to say that it's not the priority. I pray to God that it's not because it's not a priority for them.
Right.
So I'm going to say I feel like a lot of people or a lot of law enforcement may not know exactly how to proceed when they arrive on a scene, where animal cruelty, or even I don't even want to say animal cruelty, where domestic violence may be involved, but you just happen to look over and you see the dog has a broken leg, or the dog's dragging his leg,
right,
or something like that. You know, so if you may arrive to a domestic violence situation, but if you see a situation where something's looking wrong with the animal, and I keep saying dog, and I'm so sorry.
It's okay. I'm a cat lady. I won't be offended. No, but you know, it's.
But you know what I mean.
It is absolutely applies to any animal, and I think. When we're talking about prioritizing, I think we hear a lot of feedback, just through the wonderful world that is social media. Where we were talking during the most recent mayoral election that we want to make animal welfare a priority, and we want this should be a platform issue. And so many people would just reply back, "I'm sorry, but I care more about people getting murdered than animals." And I think that is an uphill battle, just as a society, that we have been battling. And, in addition, we do have animal control. We have animal cruelty investigators. But what we're finding, especially here in Houston, is that number one, they don't always know who to call. And number two, we're a bit understaffed on the animal control side. So even if a police officer does know, okay, I need somebody from another department to come in and assist me with this case, the phone's ringing and no one's on the other end to pick it up because they're understaffed. So I feel like that may be another obstacle, I think, to animal cruelty cases being properly investigated. Because I am not an attorney, but if I'm a prosecuting attorney and somebody hands me a case that has no evidence, what am I supposed to do with this? I can't convince a jury. I can't convince a judge.
No.
And then that person is going to walk regardless. And you did mention, as you were going into your introduction, talking about having a hard time convincing people that this should be a problem. Can you go a little bit more into that, what you've experienced?
I can. I definitely can. But if I can put a pin in that.
Put a pin. Come back.
And before I go to that, I just want to say, too, you made a very great point, is that I think that if they being law enforcement who arrive on the scene, maybe had someone that they could call. I did appreciate the fact that when we were in Dallas County, I had to give a shout out also to Steve Wilson, who I love, was my investigator of animal cruelty. That we developed relationships with law enforcement, and they knew, I don't care what time you can call me. And so they would call and say, hey, we have this, we're on the scene, this is what do we need to do? And so we might say, hey, because we don't want to get involved, here's our Munoz's phone number. Call him and he can help you. So it was like a collaboration amongst SPCA and Dallas Police Department. So everybody kind of was like, help one another whenever they could.
Yeah.
Okay. So back to your other question, which was dealing with jurors.
Yeah.
And I have one more thing to say.
Oh,
I'm sorry about what you said before.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you're not saying that murders aren't important. By wanting animal cruelty to be a platform as well, we're not saying that people who are being killed, that's extremely important.
Right. And it's not an either or.
And it's not an either or.
Yeah.
Right. It's that we would also like to have a platform where individuals who are committing these horrible crimes, and we're not talking about people who are, they just don't know. We're not talking about improper pet care.
Sure.
We're talking about individuals who are mean and who do horrible things to animals. And I think if people also understood that there is a intersection between elder abuse, domestic violence, assault on children, like there's the intersection, then you also would want to have that also as a platform, because sometimes the people who are killing people, they may have animal cruelty in the background.
Right.
So anyway, I had to throw that out there.
Yes, but this goes back to red flags. If someone has we don't have like a, I don't want to say a blacklist, but we don't have a list readily available for like people who have maybe had their animals seized because of X, Y, or Z. But if that is on somebody's record, if it rose to the level of some kind of criminal behavior, then now we have established a pattern of behavior, and we know that this person has done it before and would be more likely to do it again and or escalate and or move from animals to people. So you're right. It's not mutually exclusive.
Right. No.
So support people who are arguing for animal welfare.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay. So back to your question regarding jurors.
Yes.
So I have had a situation. I had a case where I went to trial on where the individual had put I think Buddy, the dog's name was Buddy.
Oh.
I think Buddy was maybe 6 to 9 months Chihuahua in a carrier and put the carrier on top of the stove. Okay. So his argument was that the stove had not worked the stove just didn't work. And somehow or another, he put his paw through the cage, the wire door, and turned the stove on somehow or another. Okay. So during jury selection, I was asking people, of course, you can't talk about the case, but I was asking people as far as how they felt about animal cruelty. And so some people were like, some people were like, I can't, if anyone does anything to an animal, I think that there needs to be some type of punishment.
Right.
Some people were like, they need to be under the jail. Some people were like, they need the death penalty. So you have a wide variety of responses.
That's one extreme.
Right. It's one extreme. And then some people were like, they're like, well, it just depends on what the situation is.
Yeah.
And so, but then I've had jurors who say, well, you know what? I don't think that an animal can feel pain. Oof. So therefore, and there's some people like, I don't feel like this should even be an offense. And I don't feel like the animals can even feel pain. And so it's hard to maintain your composure when you have people who tell you that they don't think that animals can feel pain. But of course, needless to say, those aren't the people that are on your jury.
but maybe read a book.
Right, or even if you just...
Like, Google it.
right, because we Google everything else.
Yeah.
I mean, how do you not feel like that an animal that's living and breathing does not feel any type of pain? It's crazy. But then also you have people who don't tell you how they truly feel.
Sure.
Right? Because I get it. Some people don't want to speak out in front of people, but it's those silent people who are concerning.
Yeah.
Okay. So for this particular case, we charged the stove as a deadly weapon. Okay. Because at that time it ups the punishment. It upped the level of punishment at that time. But now they're saying that you can't when I was practicing, they were saying that you can't apply the deadly weapon language to an animal cruelty case. That's a whole other story. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay.
So, and things may have changed, but that was the last time that I've dealt with something that they removed that, where they were like, you can't apply the deadly weapon language.
Was that just in Texas, or is that
That was in Texas. I don't know about anywhere else, but as far as in Texas.
In Texas,
yes. Okay. So anyway, so we go to trial, and they come back. So he was looking at 2 to 10. Okay, because at that time it was a 3rd-degree felony. So they come back and they give him state jail time. And so basically I find out that they were back there negotiating. So apparently the people were like, there's no way I'm sending this man to the penitentiary. Or they say, you know what, I will find him guilty, but I'm not going to find that the stove was a deadly weapon. And so, of course, like I said, he received state jail time, not the 2 years to 10 years, which is what he was looking at. And it was a horrible offense. Like, Buddy basically cooked on the inside.
That's horrifying.
And so, and I say that to say that people have different feelings about, animals. Some people feel like it's, people were upset that they had to even come to jury selection to sit through an animal cruelty case. So, that's one of the difficult things that we would have to go up against, for people who don't feel like it should be an offense, or people who didn't feel like that animals felt pain.
Right.
Unfortunately, you don't have people like I have to give a shout out to my godfur baby. I have I'm the godmother of a fur baby.
Oh my God, I love that.
Yes, her name is Cece. Oh. And so my girlfriend, they go on a retreat once a year. Her and Cece. She leaves her husband at home.
Where this is going.
She gets the matching outfits, and they go on a retreat once a year, just she and Cece.
That's my dream.
And it's just the cute. And I'm literally in her will.
Oh, so you
Like,
are
it's that serious.
legitimately
I'm
the godmother.
legitimately the godmother.
You will
of
inherit
Cece.
her.
So if anything, God forbid, anything happened to Harold or Shankeja Martin, but if something does, then Cece is
She's
mine.
Yours.
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
So I mean, unfortunately, we don't have people who
Right.
on the jury. Everybody on the jury is not going to do that. You know what I
Right.
mean? Everybody in the jury. You know, you have. I think too, age has something to do with jurors because
that.
back in the day, you may not have a dog in the house all the time. You know what I mean? My aunt had a dog who's way older. I love this dog. His name was Midnight, and he had a fabulous house outside.
Yeah.
I mean, it was great, but Midnight didn't come in the house unless I would beg her to let Midnight come in. So every now and then she let Midnight come in, but for the most part, Midnight had a great house outside. But it just wasn't. The dogs weren't.
It was a different time.
It was a completely
My
different
grandparents
time.
kept their dog in a kennel, like a 10-by-10 kennel outside. He could come in the house sometimes, but mostly he
Right.
was out there.
Exactly.
It was just different. So I know, and speaking of the parents of fur babies and the people on our end of the spectrum who love animals like this, I think there is probably some confusion about what constitutes criminal animal cruelty versus just civil seizure and things like that. What to rise to the level of felony, let's say animal cruelty. That's not just leaving your dog chained out in cold weather, right? That's misdemeanor.
Right.
Where are some of the differences and where you would take something to a jury trial, for example?
So, like, for example, with Buddy, that's something. If, for example, let's say an individual got upset with this animal, and there was a case, it was prior to me, where the gentleman, he bludgeoned his animal and threw him in the pool. And that's a situation where I feel like you need to go to trial.
And that's this is like intentional acts of physical harm.
Yes,
essentially. Okay,
exactly. Intentional acts of physical harm.
Okay,
not a situation. Well, there's a situation where an individual was charged with leaving his dog out on the balcony.
Okay.
But here's the thing: the dog was able to open the door, so the dog had mastered opening the door.
Clever.
And so the dog was out there, but the owner didn't know because he was at work.
Sure.
So when he comes home, it's hot. The dog is not well.
Right.
He calls boo-hooing, crying, like upset that he's like, get somebody out here. Like that situation, I feel like I don't know if that would warrant someone losing their job or being prosecuted when it's clear it wasn't anything intentional. And there's been situations again where it's proven that the dog has mastered getting out on the patio.
Yeah.
But I think you hit the nail on the head. Intentional acts of violence, I believe, are situations where I feel like cases can go to a trial.
What about intentional neglect? So deliberately withholding access to food, water, to the point of the animal has starved.
Yes.
And his skin and bones.
We've had situations like that before too, where they have they didn't feed the animals at all, and they would come home and the animals would be back there. They had a number of dogs, and they did not feed them. By the time anyone was made aware of it, they were like skin and bones, and I'm talking about
like barely
clearly
existing.
right, and they clearly died of starvation.
Right.
And so, as far as intentional neglect. Yes.
Okay.
Because it's kind of like, well, and my thing is, no one is forcing anyone to have a pet.
Right. Well, I get it if you're not.
You don't have to have a pet. If you want to have a pet, then you should be responsible and taking care of that pet. Or if you get a pet and you're like, you know what, this is more than what I thought I would be able to handle, then don't drop the pet off in a remote place. Take the animal to the animal services, animal shelter, and allow them to at least have an opportunity to get adopted.
Right. Now, where I see some gray area, and I know just having been in this industry for a long time, but also being the person who manages social media accounts, so I get to see all the commenting. One of the things that I always have a hard time with are cases of hoarding. Because we're talking about mental illness, and is this intentional versus is this, purely this person genuinely didn't know? And I've seen people on both advocating, they should be forced to live in their own feces in a kennel, Okay, well, this person is mentally ill.
And they are
doing that.
Doing that, exactly.
Right. So,
yes.
What does that ever get charged on a criminal level, and what would have to be, what would you be looking for to say whether this is just a case of this person had good intentions but needs help versus this person needs to go to jail?
So I have had situations in the past dealing with a hoarder, and and the hard part about, like you said, it is a mental illness. And in their mind, they really believe that being in a situation where there's 50 dogs
in a room,
right, is way better than being out and roaming around. Like, in their minds, they truly, truly believe that. And so, and because it is a mental illness situation, that's a hard one.
It's a hard one.
It's a very hard one, because I don't think it's a situation where a person should go to jail, because they have a mental illness. But I do think it's a situation where it needs to be addressed.
Absolutely.
But the problem with that too is we had a situation where a person we removed the animals, and like that next week they were at the animal shelter, and it's like,
take a break.
Oh my gosh! And so and just a PSA. That's when we need a list. Yeah. A universal list.
Some kind of access to records.
Some type of access to, like, this person was, they were charged with hoarding and I mean something, because you don't want to put an animal back in a situation.
Right.
So to answer your question, which I'm sure I'm not answering your question, I think with that person, we kind of maybe did like a deferred.
Okay.
To give them an opportunity. We may have made it a condition that they go to a mental health service and be evaluated.
I love that.
And then, abide by the recommendations. But when you have somebody who doesn't think that they're mentally ill, guess what? They're not going to do it. So, so then you're kind of right back in the same place that you were. Yeah. But what I would do would be maybe deferred, have them go, refer them to a mental health facility, have them be evaluated, have them abide by the recommendations, and then if they don't, it's kind of like, well, we have to.
We did what we could do.
Something has to be done.
Yeah.
I mean, it's you.
I've been a part of hoarding seizures of both kinds, where they were so grateful for the help, and where they were absolutely convinced that this was the worst thing that could happen to the animals, and they fought it tooth and nail to keep every one of those 100 and whatever animals. So it's always been something that I have found exceedingly interesting, just from like a psychological perspective, but from a legal aspect too, because you don't want to punish somebody who needs help,
right?
But how do you know what their intentions are? It is very complex and could be a whole conversation.
Extremely complex. Yes.
So I want to, I always, I told you we were going to end up chatting for forever.
Oh my gosh.
I always want to ask questions for our listeners who everybody cares about. Anyone who's listening to our podcast or watching it cares about animal cruelty, and
they should,
and they are eager to know how they can help. And I know one of the answers we always get from people from the animal cruelty side is, be observant, and if you see something, say something. But if I'm John Q. neighbor and I want to know what I can do to end animal cruelty, what should I do? What should I be looking for? How can I help save the animals around me?
I think I'm about to be so cliche.
Do something,
say something.
Do it.
And then two, I think it's important to, and then you also have to be careful in you're doing something.
Okay.
Because when you're doing something, you could actually mess up a case.
Yes, talk about this. This drives me crazy. We have so many vigilantes out in the world who are stealing animals because they think they're in trouble. So you, from a legal person, this is going to sound better than from me.
Yeah, and I understand, because you feel like you're helping this animal which is helpless. Right, and that's a reason why you're involved. It's like, one thing, don't mess with the elderly and don't mess with animals, because it's situations where you may not be able to defend themselves, and so you want to be able, of course, to help the animals.
Right.
But in doing so, one, you're potentially getting yourself a case, which is a criminal trespass case, or a theft case. And then two, if you witnessed any type of animal cruelty, or if you were able to be a benefit to the prosecution, then guess what? When they can't put you on the witness stand because of the fact that you have a pending theft charge and a pending criminal trespass charge.
Right.
And so that would affect their case. And so, and I say it to say because I know that there's so many people, like you said, who are trying to be helpful, but in trying to be helpful, they can be very harmful to a state's case by helping.
Not to mention, if the case is that the animal has no access to food or water and you feed them food and water, there went the case because now they have food.
Right.
So you have interfered and provided care to an animal, and if I'm an investigator and I show up and I'm like, well, there's food and water, so I don't know what you're talking about.
Yes.
There goes my ability to seize that animal because you interfered. Which is that's like the bystander's paradox there. Like, do I render aid and ruin the case, or do I call the authorities and watch the animal suffer? Mm-hmm. And it's an impossible choice.
Right.
But from a legal perspective, I feel like option B
is the best. And hopefully if you call, animal services, the animal services hopefully will get out there that day and they'll speak with the owner, and maybe it's a situation where, let's say, they can't afford, unfortunately, to provide them food, and then maybe they're giving them whatever leftover that they have.
Yeah.
There's a lot of times where owners they won't eat so that their fur babies can eat. It might be a situation where they're unable to feed them, and then there are resources. I have a girlfriend who delivers dog food and cat food to different individuals who aren't able to afford it.
Wonderful.
So there are various resources out there that are available to individuals who unfortunately aren't able to provide food for their animals.
Right.
But then again, you have those people who are like, I'm eating very well, I just don't care what's going on in my backyard. And so you have those situations as well. But I think that the main thing is that if they see something, then to call animal services. And if animal services doesn't come out, then call animal services again. Sometimes you have to be, you know what they always say, the squeaky wheel gets the oil.
Yep.
So it's a situation where you might have to, call.
Yeah.
But the main thing is that have law enforcement or animal control get out there to do something, not you do it. Even though, God bless you.
Thank you for caring.
Right.
For sure.
But, let them do it.
Let them do their job. And, in Houston, we are fortunate to have multiple outlets for people to reach out to if they witness animal cruelty. We have the Harris County Animal Cruelty Task Force, which is a cooperative between animal control, animal cruelty investigations, and law enforcement. It's one of, I think, the few places where there is that cooperative information sharing going on, where they can route the call to the proper location and make sure that the proper authorities are responding. And we also have the Houston SPCA's cruelty investigations team. So we're not without resources here. It's just a matter of people knowing who to call and being willing to take that step. We have a lot of people who will message us privately and say, my neighbor will know it's me. I have to live next to this person. And to those people, know that you can submit an anonymous report to the Harris County Cruelty Task Force. But we always have to take people's safety into consideration in these situations.
Yes, that's very true.
Because what we talked about at the beginning, if they're perpetrating violence against an animal, it's not far off for them to do it to a person. So exercise caution when you are taking photos, gathering evidence, whatever that case may be, because we don't want anyone to be harmed as a result of it. I have probably like a million other questions I could ask you, so I'm probably going to have you back so we can talk about more.
Yes.
Because we're going to lose. People are like, 40 minutes. All right, guys. But no, it's so interesting and so wonderful to be able to hear from the law side of animal cruelty, because I know a lot of our supporters and our friends and our partners are like, not enough is being done, but it's we're operating within a judicial system, and this is what we can do within the system, and it speaks to vote in your elections so that we have leaders who care, and that includes district attorneys.
Because let me say this, they had an amazing, everything that I've learned, I have to give a shout out to their former animal cruelty prosecutor. She's now in private practice, but everything that I've learned, I learned from her, and she was an amazing animal cruelty prosecutor. So, but I mean, you're exactly right. Like, it has to be important, to everyone. And again, we're not saying that one thing is more important than the other. What we're saying is that this too is important as well, and that's something that we should definitely take serious. And I think that we need, and this is a whole nother time, but I think it's important too to get into these schools.
Yes.
Because I think things start early. Like children need to know,
absolutely,
about animal cruelty and what it looks like, and you don't want to be cruel to animals. And so that's another show.
That's all, and
Lisa.
I will give the shout out because two of our partners really have taken the mantle on that. One is Crime Stoppers of Houston, where they have their school programs that we fund, where they're going in and talking about safety around animals, but also being kind to animals. And then, of course, our wonderful partners at Barrio Dogs, who their school program is instilling a love of animals in elementary school age children.
Oh, that's awesome.
So we could not agree more. Education is so important, not just for our law enforcement,
right,
but also for the kiddos who will eventually grow up to become citizens and hopefully contributing members of society. No people, scooping up bunnies and bopping them and turning into school shooters. We're gonna hope that those are a thing of the past. Fee, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for having me.
You are so busy because you are good at what you do, and I thank you for taking the time to come and impart this wealth of knowledge.
Well, thank you. I hope it was helpful.
Absolutely. I came to animal welfare because I watched Animal Cops Houston and Animal Cops New York. And so, this has been a passion of mine for as long as I've been in this industry. And we can't have those conversations unless we understand the law.
Right.
So thank you. And thank you for all you have done over the past
decade
decade plus to help animals.
God. I'm old.
In
Terry,
Texas.
I'm old.
No, it's fine. we're all ageless in
yes,
here.
we are. You're right. We are ageless. Yes.
So thank you again for joining us, and thank you for tuning in. This has been Conversations for the Animals, and we will see you next time.